Sometimes the people who carry the heaviest burdens are the ones no one ever notices. David worked as a janitor in a big office building downtown. His life was simple, but not easy. Every morning before the sun rose, he packed a small lunch for his daughter Lily, just 8 years old, and kissed her on the forehead before sending her off to school. Then he walked to work, wearing the same faded uniform he had worn for years. David had lost his wife to illness when Lily was only a baby. Since then, every decision he made, every ounce of strength he had, went into raising his little girl. He never complained, even though money was always tight. His co-workers saw him as the quiet man with a mop, someone who never drew attention, someone easy to overlook. But what no one knew was the depth of his heart, how he lived not for himself, but for his child. One rainy Tuesday, after finishing his cleaning rounds, David noticed an old woman sitting quietly in the lobby of the building. She wore a wool coat that looked far too heavy for her thin frame, and her silver hair was slightly tangled. She looked lost, her eyes darting around as if the world had become unfamiliar. David hesitated at first. He was just a janitor. Surely security or someone else should step in. But something about the old woman's trembling hands made him walk closer. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked softly. The woman blinked at him, her eyes wide. "I don't know where I am. I think I was supposed to meet my son, but I can't remember." Her voice cracked, filled with confusion. David felt a twist in his chest. He thought of his own mother, long gone now, and of Lily, who might one day find herself alone in a world too big and cold. "But don't worry," he said gently. "You're safe here. What's your son's name? Maybe I can help." She frowned, struggling to recall, whispering, He works in this building. "I think he's important." David gave her a kind smile. "That's all right. Let's sit you down, maybe get you some water. We'll figure it out together." And so, a janitor with calloused hands and tired eyes found himself caring for a woman who seemed to have lost her way. But what David didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that this woman was not as lost as she appeared. She was playing a role, hiding behind the veil of frailty, for beneath her trembling voice and vacant stare was a plan that would change David's life forever. David made it a habit to check on the old woman whenever he could. She said her name was Margaret. Some days she remembered it. Other days she just smiled faintly and asked him the same question over and over. "Have you seen my son?" David never grew impatient. If she forgot his name, he reminded her. If she dropped something, he picked it up without hesitation. Sometimes he would sit beside her during his short lunch break, offering half of his sandwich. His coworkers laughed quietly behind his back. "A look at the janitor, wasting his time with that crazy old lady," one whispered. David ignored them. He had taught Lily that kindness was never wasted, and he wasn't about to betray his own lesson. One evening, after everyone had gone home, David saw Margaret wandering the corridor near the executive offices. She was staring at a door, one with gold letters on the glass that spelled out Richard H. Collins, CEO. When David approached, she quickly looked away. "He was just lost again," she mumbled, her frail hands twisting together. David smiled softly. "It's all right. Let's get you back downstairs." But something in her eyes stayed with him. It wasn't confusion. It was sharp, calculating, like she was looking for something she didn't want him to know. That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay awake beside Lily, who had crawled into his bed after a nightmare. He stroked her hair, wondering why Margaret's eyes had unsettled him. She was old and vulnerable, yes, but there was something hidden beneath her act of fragility. The next day, while mopping the marble floor, David overheard two executives whispering near the elevator. "Did you hear? Collins is under investigation. Something about stolen funds. Keep your voice down. If the press finds out, this company will sink." David froze, his mop dripping dirty water onto the floor. Richard Collins, the CEO. Was that Margaret's son? He thought back to her trembling voice, her questions about her son, her wandering near his office. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces began to shift. Maybe she wasn't lost at all. Maybe she was searching. And David, the quiet janitor who had only wanted to help, was now caught in the middle of a story much bigger than he could imagine. One evening, David found Margaret sitting alone in the lobby after everyone had gone home. The lights were dim, the building silent except for the hum of the vending machine. She looked smaller than usual, her shoulders slumped under her heavy coat. He sat beside her. "Do you want me to call your son, Margaret? Maybe he could come get you. Get you." For the first time, her eyes lifted to meet his directly. Clear, sharp, steady, not the vacant stare of a woman with dementia. "My son doesn't know I'm here," she said quietly, "and I intend to keep it that way, at least for now." David's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Richard is my son, the CEO of this company. I've been pretending to forget things so I can move around unnoticed. People ignore the old and confused. They look right through us, and that's exactly what I need." David's heart pounded. Why?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't fall. "Because my son is not the man I raised. He is stealing from this company, from his employees. I couldn't believe it at first, but I had to see it with my own eyes, and now I have. I only needed someone honest, someone kind, to help me get close enough." David sat frozen. He thought about the whispered rumors, the nervous executives, the sharpness he had seen in Margaret's eyes that night near Richard's office. It all made sense now. Margaret reached for his hand, her fingers cold but firm. "David, you are the only person who has treated me with dignity. No judgment, no impatience, only kindness. I need your help to expose Richard. Will you stand with me?" For a moment, David thought of Lily, of her small hand in his, of the life he had built around protecting her. He was just a janitor. What could he possibly do against a man like Richard Collins? But then he looked into Margaret's eyes. Behind the wrinkles and tiredness, he saw a mother's pain. The same pain he knew so well, the pain of loving a child and watching them slip away. "Yes," David whispered, "I'll help you." And with that promise, the quiet janitor stepped into a storm that would test everything he had. His courage, his strength, his very hope for the future. What neither he nor Margaret knew was that the truth, once revealed, would shatter lives, but also heal hearts in ways they never imagined. Sometimes she paused, her hand trembling. "Do you know why I asked you, David? Why not anyone else?" He shook his head. "Because kindness is rare in a world driven by greed. My son has forgotten it, but you live it every day." Her words stayed with him. Whenever doubt crept in, he thought of Lily. How she looked up to him, how she believed her father was strong even when life was hard. He wanted to be the man she thought he was. Weeks passed until finally, Margaret had everything she needed. With David's help, she slipped the evidence into the hands of the authorities. What followed was swift and shocking. Richard Collins was arrested for embezzlement, the company shaken to its core. The building buzzed with the news, employees whispering, reporters gathering outside. Most were too busy gossiping to notice the janitor standing quietly by the lobby doors, watching Margaret. She looked at him with both grief and relief. "It hurts," he admitted softly. "No mother dreams of exposing her child, but wrong is wrong, and I couldn't leave this world knowing he was destroying lives." David nodded, his throat tight. "You did the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing." Then Margaret took his rough, work-worn hands in hers. "And you, David, you've been my strength through all of this. A stranger showed me more love than my own son. Don't ever think you're just a janitor. You're proof that dignity doesn't come from money or titles. It comes from the heart." Tears stung David's eyes, but before he could answer, a small voice called from the doorway. "Daddy!" Lily ran to him, her school bag bouncing, her smile lighting up the room. David lifted her into his arms, his weariness melting for just a moment. Margaret watched them, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something more but couldn't. "Finally," she whispered, "take care of her, and let her take care of you too." Days later, when the scandal had calmed, Margaret left quietly, refusing interviews, refusing attention. But before she disappeared, she left an envelope for David. Inside was a simple note. "Thank you for helping me remember that goodness still lives in this world. For your daughter's future, may life be gentler from now on." And tucked with the note, a scholarship fund for Lily, enough to ensure she would never have to struggle the way her father had. David sat at his small kitchen table that night, staring at the letter with tears running down his face. Lily slept peacefully in the next room, dreaming without fear of tomorrow. For the first time in years, David allowed himself to hope, because sometimes acts of kindness ripple further than we ever expect. reaching broken hearts, changing destinies, and proving that love and quiet strength can outshine even the darkest secrets. Weeks later, on a bright Sunday morning, David sat on a park bench while Lily played on the swings. The air smelled of fresh grass, children's laughter filled the space, and for the first time in a long while, his shoulders felt light. He looked down at the letter again, folded and worn from how many times he had read it. Margaret's words seemed to whisper in the breeze. Don't ever think you're just a janitor. You're proof that dignity doesn't come from money or titles. It comes from the heart. A gentle laugh escaped his lips. He had spent so many years believing he was invisible, that his life was small and ordinary. But sitting there, watching his daughter fly higher and higher on the swing, he realized something important. Ordinary love is never small. Quiet kindness is never wasted. David lifted his hand and waved at Lily, and she waved back with the biggest smile. In that moment, he didn't feel like a man who had lost or struggled or barely scraped by. He felt like the richest man in the world because he had something no one could steal, love that endured every hardship. And somewhere, he hoped Margaret found peace too, knowing that her painful choice had planted a brighter tomorrow. Not just for her son's company, but for one little girl who now had a future full of hope. The sun broke through the clouds, warm and golden. And David whispered to himself with a full heart, "We'll be okay."